Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I have some freezer meals for you. It's that time of year when things are about to get really busy with back to school, fall sports, all that stuff is going to be happening soon. So now is the time to go ahead and prep some freezer meals to make your life easier then. Today I have 4 recipes for you and 2 different methods you can use to store these. I hope you enjoy. Let's go ahead and get started. First up, I'm going to show you how you can make these easy frozen burgers at home and not buy the prepackaged ones at the store. I have 2 pounds of ground beef here. You can use any kind that you want to. I got mine on markdown, so that made it cheaper than the packages in the freezer. I just seasoned mine with about 2 teaspoons of this famous Dave's burger and steak seasoning, about a teaspoon of garlic powder, and about a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. You definitely do not have to use the same seasonings as me. That's what's great about doing these at home. You can make them however you want to, and then you also know exactly what's in your burger. I usually try to do about 4 burgers per pound, so in this package I'm going to end up with about 8 burgers. If you want smaller burgers, you can totally do that. We like to have a decent sized burger though, and by the time it cooks, it does shrink up a little bit. As I patty these up, I'm going to add 1 small little sheet of parchment paper between each one. That way they don't stick together, and when you take them out of the freezer, they come right apart. You can make these little squares of parchment paper by just cutting up your parchment paper that you probably already have in your cabinet. To store these, I'm just going to be taking a freezer gallon size bag. You'll just pull the edges down and try to round out the bag the best you can. That way you can lift the stack of burgers straight up and into that bag. You'll pull the edges up and seal it nice and tight. Try to get any air out that you can. And then this just goes straight to your freezer until you're ready to use it. When the day comes you're ready to cook dinner with these, you'll just be able to pull these right apart. The parchment paper keeps them from sticking together too badly. They come right out like this, and then you can peel the paper right off as well. I was doing this one-handed. It actually is not as complicated as I'm making it look right now. And you can actually cook these from frozen. You do not need to let them thaw. My husband just cooked these up on the grill for us. We added some cheese and I served these with some French fries. And this is super easy, like I said, great item to keep on hand. You don't have to worry about getting your hands messy. You can make these in no time. Next, this is probably my favorite freezer meal. We're making cheesy potatoes and chicken. I started by preheating my oven to 375 degrees. And then over to my cutting board, I'm just chopping up half of a yellow onion into smaller pieces, but not too small. You want to keep them at least bite size. Next, I'm going to be cutting up about 3 pounds of potatoes. I am leaving the skin on and cutting them a pretty decent size, just like this. And the reason that I'm using yellow and red, that's just what I had on hand, but you can use one or the other, or you can use russet potatoes. Then you will need to cook a 1/2 pound of bacon and chop that up. And for my chicken breasts, I have 2 chicken breasts here. One is a little smaller, one is pretty large. I'm just going to cut these into bite-sized pieces. Now you're going to need 2 8x8 dishes. I have 1 glass dish that I'm using for dinner this evening, and 1 aluminum pan that I'm actually going to be using to put in the freezer as my freezer meal. I'm going to divide my potatoes between the 2 dishes, and you want to make sure these potatoes are as flat as they can be on the bottom. Before we go any further, I just like to season the potatoes lightly. So like I say, I like to do a layer of salt, a layer of pepper, a layer of garlic powder, and I would say this is probably no more than a 1/4 teaspoon each for all 3 of those seasonings. Next, you'll just split the chicken up between the 2 dishes, and you want to try to keep the chicken on top of the potatoes. Try not to move the potatoes around too much if you can. On top of the chicken, then you will add your onion. Like I said, just split that between both pans. And now I'm just repeating those seasonings, probably about a 1/4 teaspoon of each once again. Next, you'll need about a 1/4 cup of shredded sharp cheddar cheese over top of both of them. You're going to add more cheese later, but for right now, that's all you need. Next, you'll just split up the bacon between the 2 dishes, sprinkling them evenly over everything. Now you will need heavy cream. You can also use half and half, but the heavy cream does make the texture of this much better. You will just pour this over top of everything until you have made sure all of your potatoes are covered and not showing. For me, this is usually about a 1/2 cup to 3/4 of a cup each. I like to take a fork and press everything down just to make sure that all the potatoes are hidden. Next, you'll take 3 tablespoons of butter and you'll slice that into smaller pieces and just add it over top. I stuck my glass dish in the oven now, let it bake for about 50 minutes and then we will check on it. This one over here, like I said, just making sure all my potatoes are covered. That way they don't turn brown in the freezer, that's a big deal. So make sure all the potatoes are nicely covered, and then you're going to add a piece of Glad press and seal over the top. This works wonder for freezer meals. And then I'm just labeling my piece of foil that's going to go on top. When I make these from frozen, I like to first thaw them overnight if I can. If not, they just take a lot longer to bake in the oven. But if you can thaw it, do that first. I said to bake 1 hour at 375, but really you'll bake 50 minutes, pull it out, add the cheese, and then put it back in for 10 more minutes to melt the cheese. And then I'm just labeling it also so I know what it is later on. Cheesy potato and chicken bake. You'll just add this right over top of the Glad press and seal, and when you do go to cook this, you will remove the foil and the plastic wrap underneath. These 2 layers are just to protect it from the cold temperature of the freezer. When you make dinners where you know that it can also be a freezer meal, it's always a really great idea to make an extra pan just like this, and this is how you can get your freezer stockpile going. So now I have dinner made and I have a freezer meal made for future use, and it hardly took me any extra time to do. Here's what it'll look like after 50 minutes in the oven. I just like to go through and make sure that all my potatoes are tender, and then I give it a good stir together. Next, you'll just top that off with about a cup of sharp cheddar cheese. Freshly shredded is better, of course, so if you have that, do use that one instead. But once you get that cup of cheese on, this is going back in the oven for 10 minutes, long enough to melt the cheese. Here is what my finished plate looked like. If you want to, you can also add broccoli into this. Of course I don't, because my husband probably would not eat it then, but this is what it will look like without the broccoli. So delicious, and everyone will love it. Up next, we're going to be making this delicious taco tortellini. Over on my stove, I have a nice big pot here. I'm just adding in 1 pound of ground beef. Gonna go ahead and break that apart and let it begin to cook. Feel free to add in an onion to cook with your ground beef. I didn't have one on this night, so that's why I did not, but usually I would add half of a yellow onion chopped. Once my ground beef is all done, I am going to drain off all that extra grease. Bring it back over to the stove, and we're going to add in 1 jar of Alfredo sauce. You can use any Alfredo sauce that you want to. This one is a very cheap and inexpensive one. It tastes good with any kind. You can also make your own if you have the time to do that, but the jar is just very quick and easy. Into my Alfredo jar, I added in a 1/2 cup of milk, gave it a good shake, and poured that in as well. That'll just help to remove anything extra from the jar. 1 can of diced tomatoes with green chilies, or you can just do a can of diced tomatoes. Then you'll need to add about 4 tablespoons of taco seasoning. Give this a really good mix to make sure you combine the seasonings with the sauce and the ground beef. And then you'll just let this simmer on your stove for about 5 minutes until it's bubbling. Next, I'm adding in about 18 ounces of frozen tortellini. I did not thaw this tortellini out, it is completely frozen. You'll just mix it right in here and let it cook in this warm sauce. Once my tortellini was just about done, I added in 1 can of drained and rinsed black beans, and I'm going to let this continue to heat through for about 5 more minutes. If you're planning on eating this today, you can just go ahead and top it with some mild cheddar and let it melt down, and then it's ready to eat. But for us, I'm actually going to be putting it in nice small freezer containers just so I can make some quick and easy heat and eat meals for us. I just fill these up to the top. I add just a little bit of shredded cheese over the top, and then I let them cool down before adding the Glad press and seal over the top. After I get the press and seal on the top, I add a lid, and you can label this if you want to, but I will know what they all are in the freezer, so it's not a big deal to me. But now doing it this way, we have some individual freezer meals that we can heat up anytime. When you are ready to eat one of these meals, you'll just take it right out of the freezer. I do remove the lid and I remove the press and seal. Microwaving this one is a little longer than normal. Usually I only need to microwave something for about 30 seconds to a minute before I can stir it. This one I actually microwaved for 1 minute and 30 seconds, stirred it, and then cooked an additional 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then I was able to dump it onto a plate. Of course you can eat it out of the container, but I just like to eat it on a plate. Here's what it'll look like when it is all done. You can add any of your favorite taco toppings on here. I added some hot sauce and sour cream just because that's what I had in the refrigerator at this time. But like I said, this is a super easy, quick meal. If it's just me one night, I can pull one of these out and I have a quick dinner. Now we're gonna make these French dip sandwiches, and these are done in the crock pot. You will need about a 2.5 pound chuck roast. Mine, I had to freeze it. I did get it when it was on sale and it dated very shortly after, so I wanted to make sure I froze it, and I did have to pull it out of here frozen, but luckily it came out very nicely. So for this, you will just need a gallon size bag. Add your chuck roast right in there first, and then over top of the chuck roast, we're going to add some seasonings. 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of oregano, a 1/2 teaspoon of thyme, 3 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce, or you can use coconut aminos as well. And last but not least, make sure you have a good hold of your bag, that way this does not spill out. You'll add 3 cups of beef broth. Once everything is in my bag, I'm just going to get as much air out as possible, give it a good little swish together, and then this is going in the freezer until I'm ready to use it. Today is the day we're making our French dip sandwiches. I took this straight from the freezer and I'm adding it right into the crock pot. There is no need to thaw it out. You'll just add a lid and let this cook on a high heat for about 6 to 7 hours. Here's what it looked like when it was all done. It was falling apart at this point, so it was all ready to go. I went ahead and removed it all from the crock pot and added it onto a plate. You'll just want to make sure you remove any big pieces of fat, shred it, and then add it back into the crock pot. I'm going to let that continue to sit in the juices for about 10 more minutes while I get my buns ready. For this, I'm just using some steak rolls. I added them onto a parchment lined baking sheet and I baked those for about 7 to 8 minutes in the oven on 350 just to get them a little bit crispy. You can also throw these in a toaster if you want to. I just decided to do them all in the oven at the same time. Once they're out of the oven, go ahead and add a nice big spoonful of your shredded beef on there. I did go ahead and drain some of the liquid off as I added it on, and then you'll just add 1 piece of provolone cheese over the top. I put these back in the oven for about 5 more minutes just to melt the cheese. Here's what my plate looked like when it was all done. We just added some of that juice over into a little bowl so you can dip your sandwich in it, and I also made some tater tots to go along the side. This was my husband's plate. I'm not big on tater tots, but he loves them, and this is what dinner will look like if you choose to do this freezer meal. Thanks so much for watching today. I truly appreciate you being here. Add a flower down in the comments if you made it all the way to the end of this video, and give me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed and would like to see more videos like this. I will see you guys back here on Sunday for a new video. Bye guys.